Hello, I'm Tabitha Tripp from Tender Hearts Home Healthcare, and I also belong to a group called the Senior Resource Association, which is a group of professionals that come together to provide answers to some of those complex questions to our seniors. And today my guest is Kimberly Ferreira. She's a registered dietitian and licensed nutritionist for Coastline Elderly. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Tabitha.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good, good. This is such a great topic for me. We're going to talk today about healthy eating for seniors. And we all know seniors decrease their nutrition, their eating habits as they progress in life. I see it all the time in the field that I do. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges that you know of that the seniors face.
Yes. As we get older, it doesn't get easier, unfortunately. And we do have a lot of challenges that are faced as we get older. There's a lot of physiological changes that happen. There are a lot of social changes that happen. And it just brings about a lot of different challenges in itself that, believe it or not, deal with what we eat every day.
Right. What are some of those changes?
Well, in terms of our body, unfortunately, these are things we can't change. The first thing is there's a real big shift in our body composition. So, and that directly relates with our metabolism. So as much as we would love to be super lean and muscular, as we get older, we really start to get a lot more fat and less muscle. The muscle starts to go down a little bit. And with that, our metabolism goes down, unfortunately. So we just don't require the amount of calories as we did, in our 20s and 30s. Another thing that happens is we do get a decline in our immune system, which just makes us a lot more susceptible to diseases and infections. There's also a change in our gut. So normally when we eat, our body releases acid, and that helps to break things down and it helps to absorb certain nutrients. But as we get older, the older adult, they produce less acid. So that makes a big difference in terms of the availability of certain nutrients like B12 and folate. So those are nutrients that as we get older, we end up needing more of. And because of that acid, it also affects the type of calcium that we absorb, and we know that's a big topic, which we'll get into. Some other issues are sensory losses. We just don't recognize thirst like we used to, and definitely appetite losses, changes in appetite or taste. And
so we see that a lot too with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Of course.
They forget to eat. They just don't have that knowledge that they are hungry.
Exactly.
Or just an elder in general. I know that my caregivers are always putting out water because they just don't realize that, their body needs water to drink.
Exactly. And many of us who don't get enough fluids, we have a hard time realizing that we're thirsty, and as we get older, it gets even worse. So our body may be dehydrated, but we don't really feel thirsty, so we don't want to drink. We don't want to drink anything. And the last one really is dental issues. So people losing teeth, people having ill-fitting dentures. That makes a big difference in terms of what they can eat and how much of it they can eat. Are they in pain when they eat? So those are a lot of different changes that happen more commonly with the older adult.
And what about, I'm sure also, and we see this too, I know, and I'm sure you do, when there's a loss of a husband or wife.
Of course.
They just don't want to cook for one person anymore. I mean, it's so much easier to just go to the kitchen, grab a little piece of turkey and grab a cracker, they're done.
It is. And, the social aspect of as we get older really is a big one. I get people all the time saying, now it's just me. I used to cook for a family, now it's just me. I have no motivation to cook. And that's really difficult in making them understand and giving them ideas on ideas, but the motivation still has to be there, and that's a really difficult thing. The other social part of it is a lot of different medications. A lot of older adults are on a lot of medications, and that affects, one, appetite, whether it makes them less hungry or more hungry, and two, it may affect what nutrients are being absorbed. Maybe some masks other. It may affect their fluid regulation. And then the last one is a lot of older adults have multiple medical conditions. And I get consumers all the time asking me, I go into the grocery store and I'm so overwhelmed. I'm trying to find a food that is not high in sugar for my diabetes, but also not high in sodium for my high blood pressure and cholesterol. So they get very overwhelmed on really knowing what to buy because they have all these other things going on. So
they're going to buy simple things instead of more nutrition items. So let's talk about nutrition. That's, we've covered some of the bases as to why.
Right.
So now we're going to get into the meats and potatoes of things. Meats and potatoes.
Yeah.
No pun intended. Okay, let's start off with fruit and vegetables. Are there some that are better than others?
Well,
and how much should an adult, a senior have?
Yeah. We, in general, all the health organizations, people like myself as a dietitian, doctors, health professionals, we all scream, eat your fruits and vegetables, eat your fruits and vegetables. And the thing with them is we know they're loaded with vitamins and minerals. All of them are loaded with different antioxidants. We say eat with color because fruit and vegetables have different pigments, and those pigments contain specific antioxidants that are really geared towards certain aspects of our body and have been shown to help with certain cancers. Fruits and vegetables are loaded with potassium, which really helps to counteract the sodium issue, and it really helps with blood pressure. Fruits and vegetables are wonderful to include if you're diabetic because they are lower in calories. So, and the last one is they have tons of fluid. So for those people who have a hard time getting their fluids, it's a great way to incorporate your fruits and vegetables, because there are some fruits and vegetables like melons and cucumbers that are over 90% water. So it's a great way to pump up that fluid intake by eating your fruits and vegetables.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's strategies that are used.
Is part of the fluid intake.
It is. Obviously we want to include all fruits and vegetables. At mealtime, the goal at mealtime is for your plate, you want to have half of your plate filled with fruits and vegetables, as much as you can. And all fruits and vegetables are wonderful. Some key ones that we've seen a lot recently because of the amount of research that's been done is when it comes to fruit, there's a lot of good evidence about berries, the dark-skinned berries, your blueberries, your raspberries, your blackberries, your strawberries, and they really contain just a concentrated amount of antioxidants that have just been shown to be so helpful for us. The other great thing is if you are diabetic, we know fruit naturally contains sugar, but per serving, berries tend to be a little bit lower in sugar. So you almost get, more volume for the amount of sugars. So a small banana, you could get a cup and a half of berries. So it makes it kind of nice for them to get a little bit more in.
Okay. So you were talking about the plate being 3/4?
Half
fruit and vegetable. And then your protein, I'm assuming?
Yep, we want to have a quarter protein and a quarter of our starch. It's the new plate method. It just came out, so there's not tons of different PowerPoints and things like that yet for educators, but it's coming out any day now. They just released it. That is now going to replace the pyramid.
Oh, okay.
So we're now shifting quite a few years of kind of having that pyramid style of eating, and now it's more focused on the plate, which hopefully makes it a little bit more visual for people to kind of understand how to balance everything.
What about grains?
Grains, yes. The big focus on grains is whole grains, and what that means is a whole grain is the grain is intact. All the components of the grain is intact. It has not been processed, meaning the outside hasn't been stripped in any way. And what is great about that is grains naturally have fiber. Grains naturally have a lot of B vitamins, including folate. So when you have something that's a whole grain, you're getting the natural vitamins and components of the grain.
You mean a whole grain, meaning one grain versus like a multigrain? Now, it used to be wheat bread. Everybody went from white when they said white has bleach in it, and they went to wheat, and now it's all the grains.
It would be, wheat is a grain. So White flour is the grain that the outside, and this little, I call it the nugget, which is the germ, has been stripped away. So you kind of are left with the inside of the grain called the endosperm. That's essentially what the white flour is. And then it's enriched. When you look at the ingredient,
Right.
it says it's enriched. It's then enriched with those vitamins that were naturally part of the whole grain.
That they took away.
Exactly. So wheat is a whole grain. Oatmeal is a whole grain. You can get into other grains like rye and quinoa and buckwheat.
So is it better to have them all singularly than in a multigrain bread?
It depends. It can be very tricky because some people will say that they think that they have a whole grain, but don't be fooled by the color. If you look in the ingredients and it has molasses or caramel coloring, chances are it's darker because of that. So the best way to know is go right to the ingredients. The first ingredient should have the word whole in it.
Okay.
If it says whole, then you know you're getting a whole grain, whether it's from wheat or whether it's from corn or whether it's from oats. The first ingredient has to have the word whole in it.
Okay, good. All right, another thing that the elders are always concerned about, of course, is their bone health and milk. I mean, I have clients that do not like milk. Are supplements enough, or?
It's a combination, really. With bone loss, between the ages of 50 and 60, we get a rapid decrease of our bone loss. So that's where you see 1 in 2 women over 50 have osteoporosis. 1 in every 4 men have osteoporosis, believe it or not. So it's so common amongst the older adult. And calcium and vitamin D are really those key nutrients that help to maintain that bone structure. So it's a couple of those nutrients that actually increase as we get older. The problem is there aren't tons of different areas of food that we can get it. The big one, as you know, is dairy. Yeah. And we have to watch that as well because full-fat dairy is very high in saturated fat. And that's the fat that really clogs up those arteries. So if we can switch to things like lower fat or non-fat milk, low fat or skim milk based yogurt.
And they're still getting the same amount of nutrients.
They're still
from
getting
calcium.
the same amount of calcium. They do not be fooled. It's just the fat is being skimmed out. Things like cheeses. If you can stand the taste and texture, it can get a little iffy as the fat comes out. But I always say if you can meet in the middle somewhere, if you can find maybe a 2% based cheese, so at least you're eliminating the saturated fat a little bit. People who have lactose issues, they can definitely go to alternative milks like almond milk. There are almond-based and soy-based yogurts as well, so soy milk. There are foods that are fortified. Orange juice is a big one. A lot of people talk about fortified orange juice. There is pastas out there as well that you can get that are starting to be fortified with calcium.
So an orange juice that has calcium in it, is that the same amount of calcium you're going to get in a glass of milk?
Just about, yep.
Really? So you're getting your vitamin C and your
Exactly,
calcium at
and
the same
vitamin
time.
C and vitamin D help to allow calcium to get absorbed better. So that's where you may see it in a lot of juices because calcium and vitamin C go together very, very well.
Well, I just think that's just such a great idea because I don't think a lot of people know that they're getting the same. When you think about calcium in juice, I always thought it must have that much calcium in it and the rest is just all
They
vitamin
do
C.
make it worth it for you. Good thing. Food manufacturers, when they do supplement it. What I will say, though, is when you are trying to balance the food that has calcium in it along with your supplements, it's important to know that our body only absorbs between 300 and 500 milligrams at a time. So with that being said, it's not advised to have your glass of milk in the morning with your calcium supplement because you're probably going to be getting way too much and you're not going to absorb it all. So if you are going to take a supplement, you should balance it out during the time that you're not eating a calcium-rich food.
I was told to take calcium tablets at night. Is that true?
It is true. Later at night,
Okay.
The research does say that we absorb it a lot better, so it makes it it's a good strategy to include it maybe with dinner if you aren't getting your calcium then. Sardines, I say, is one of the best bone-friendly foods because sardines are a rich source of calcium, and they're also a very rich source of vitamin D.
Yeah.
So you're kind of hitting two birds with one stone.
My grandmother used to pick it up out of the can and say, "This is so good for you." I just still to this day can't see myself.
Not
eating a
everyone likes
sardine.
them, but if you do, they're kind of a
really
winner
good
in
for
terms
you.
of bone health.
Okay, that said, let's move on to like fish, omega-3, and things of that nature. I know mercury is a concern.
Yeah. The recent dietary guidelines came out. They come out every 5 years. So in January, this past January, they came out for the 2010 recommendation. And there is a big push to increase the amount of fish and seafood that we eat. The first reason is it's such a lean source of protein. We don't have to worry about the artery clogging fats that we do as much with, skinned poultry and red meat. So a lot of those types of foods, seafood and fish, really don't contain saturated fat. What else is nice is they do contain a good source of vitamin D and omega-3s. The oily-based fish, so your salmon, your mackerel, your tuna, those are the types of fish that you're going to be better off if you're really trying to eat fish more because of the vitamin D and the omega-3s.
How about swordfish? Is that in there?
Swordfish is up there as well. It tends to be
more
the
so
big,
than like haddock or scrod, right?
yes.
Okay.
But those are still going to contain vitamin D and omega-3s. Maybe not at the level of things like salmon and swordfish, but they will be in there. And the thing with omega-3s is they're very anti-inflammatory. So there's a lot of wonderful research out there to support helping with things like arthritis. It's wonderful for brain health. So I know we all want to keep our
Salmon
brains
is wonderful for brain health?
Yes,
Oh.
fish because of the omega-3s.
You know what I'm having for supper
Yeah.
tonight?
The thing with mercury is the benefits of fish outweigh the risks of mercury. And in terms of mercury, there tends to be more higher risk groups. So children, women of childbearing age, that's the real risk of mercury because mercury tends to affect the brain and the development. So, for the older adult, they're not really in the high risk
Now, let me
group.
ask you that's a good point. When you said brain, what about an elder that has dementia or Alzheimer's? Should they kind of stay away from a fish that would be of concern?
Well, if they are concerned about the mercury level, one, you have to eat quite a bit of fish to withstand mercury poisoning. But there are fish that tend to be higher in mercury, like swordfish. Swordfish tends to be very high in mercury. Tuna. But again, you'd have to be eating cans of it every day. Most people aren't really doing that. So the concern isn't as big as I think maybe people believe. And so again, the benefits do outweigh the risks. And there are charts people can look at. Believe it or not, they have charts on what you can safely consume because canned tuna tends to be very popular. So there are charts out there that say if you weigh this much, you can safely consume this many cans every how many days, so you won't be overdoing it in the mercury. So those are great resources for people to have if they are a little bit concerned about if they're overdoing it a little bit.
Okay, that's good to know. How about things like nuts and seeds and things that are high in fat? I do have an aunt.
Yeah.
She eats nuts all the time, which, and she does. She eats the good nuts. I think, walnuts and almonds are your best nuts.
Well, nuts and seeds in general are a great source of fat. And what's nice is there are plant fats. So when we are talking about needing fat in a day, we're talking about our omega-3s, and we're also talking about those plant-based fats. So nuts and seeds are wonderful to incorporate in our diet, but we do have to remember they are fat. So we have to be careful with the portion. Believe it or not, a portion of nuts, they recommend an ounce a day. Guess how much that is?
That's like a small little handful.
It's a quarter of a cup.
A quarter of a cup.
It's very easy to get 2 to 3 servings without even think about it.
Sitting there? It's so
Right.
easy. My aunt just pops them into her mouth like they were like
Right.
candy.
And then we're really, we're defeating the benefit of what we were getting them for. Nuts and seeds also are one of our few sources of vitamin E, and vitamin E is another great antioxidant. So in terms of which ones are better, just to point out, almonds tend to have a little bit of calcium. So they're not a rich source, but they are one of the few nuts that have calcium in it. And nuts and seeds like walnuts and flaxseed, they're also a good source of omega-3s. So if you're trying to get those in and you're not really a fish person, then you can start to incorporate those. You could take ground flaxseed, you can buy it in a little package, and you can sprinkle it on,
I do that.
on your
I
cereal.
sprinkle all my Cheerios in the morning.
Yep,
You know?
or your yogurt, or sprinkle it on your oatmeal. If you're making breads, you can sprinkle it in there.
Yeah.
So it's another way to get that nutrient if you don't feel like you're getting enough fish, which the recommendation is 2 times a week.
So they should stay within a quarter of a cup of nuts a day.
Yes, as much as possible, because it is a rich source. I mean, a
Right.
quarter of a cup is typically anywhere from 12 to 17 grams of fat. So multiply that by 3, you're
And high in calories too, right?
well, because of the fat,
Right.
nuts are around 150 calories for a quarter of a cup. So with that being said, there are older adults who are trying to gain weight. So that is a good food to incorporate because it is rich in calories and the fat is more of that nice, healthy plant fat.
Okay. Let's see. How about those that are diabetics or watching sodium or watching carbs? Are there better foods or better way to do nutrition for seniors?
Well, in terms of carbs, we really want to focus on the carbs that tend to have the fiber in it. So that's where we're focusing on the whole grains. Whole grains are going to have a lot more fiber than the processed grains. So anytime that you can get fiber with that carb, it tends to slow the release. So our blood sugars gradually increase versus, skyrocketing within minutes. So the whole grains are the beneficial carbs. The fruit, as we know, has sugar, but it's natural sugar. It's found in the fruit. You can't take that out of there. And fruit also has fiber. So it's important to incorporate fruit in your diet as well. Beans are another great carb, and from a dietitian standpoint, I think they're underutilized. People are concerned with GI issues and sodium, but if you get the canned beans, as long as you're rinsing it out very well and draining it, you can get rid of almost 40% of the sodium. And that does also help with some of the GI issues too by giving them a good rinse.
Okay.
So they're very affordable, and 2, they're a nice substitution for meat if you are trying to keep costs down. So you can throw beans, with your rice. You can throw beans in with a salad. They're rich in fiber. They're rich in protein. So they're almost a great balance between the carbohydrates, the protein, and they're low in fat. So they're kind of a great winner for everyone, but especially diabetics.
And there's so many nice bean soups that you can make too.
Oh, exactly. So you really can't go wrong with beans.
I know, they're wonderful. Okay, wrapping it up, can you have any other ideas for our seniors, like what makes a good meal or what's the best route to get all your nutrients?
Well, I do have to say that as we get older, it's really difficult to get all the nutrients we need in 3 meals. So snacking is important. And snacking, I don't mean the donut or the cake. Snacking means...
I like that donut.
Snacking means incorporating food from the food groups. So, taking a fruit, and when I suggest snacking, trying to combine 2 different food groups. A lot of people say, oh, I have some crackers for a snack, or I have a fruit. That's wonderful, but when you can combine a little bit of fat and protein in there, that snack really goes a long way, and it helps to fill in the gaps. So instead of just fruit, maybe you have some cottage cheese with it, or maybe you have some string cheese. Instead of just crackers, maybe adding some peanut butter with it. And for those that live alone, one of my suggestions is kind of redefining a meal. Instead of thinking of just that protein with the starch and the vegetable, think of it as maybe a glorified snack, so to speak. So if you take yogurt and fruit, if that's normally a snack for you, maybe you add a high fiber cereal. You're adding another component to it. That can end up being a really good balanced meal. Say you do crackers and peanut butter. Maybe you just add a nice glass of milk with it. Maybe you slice up some banana and you put that on top. So it's kind of thinking outside of the box too, and realizing if you're combining at least 3 to 4 food groups for a meal and a good 2 food groups for a snack, then at least you know at the end of the day you're getting all the food groups in, and you're getting a good balance.
So that makes a lot of sense for seniors that are alone and they
Right.
don't want to think about cooking that big meal and
Right.
getting what they need. Just doing it simple ways by adding different groups together.
Exactly, because certain food groups are going to have certain nutrients and maybe low in other nutrients. So when you combine several food groups together, you know you're getting your carbs with your protein and some of your fats. Simplifying it a little bit more. And making food social.
Yeah.
If you have a reason to have friends over to cook for, or you live in a complex where you have friends close by, swapping your recipes, making a dish and swapping it so you each kind of get everybody's. Again, thinking outside of the box, because when you add the social component to food,
That's
it helps
important.
to make it a little bit more fun.
It certainly does. This was great, Kim. You're just so knowledgeable when it comes to this. And for those of you out there that saw the show today, if you have more questions for Kim, she's available for answers. You can contact the number at the end of the show, and Kim can get in touch with you. She's got wonderful ideas. Just want to thank you for coming, Kim.
Thank you, Tabitha.
All righty.
Thank you.
Join us again. Thank you so much.